So yeah, thanks for this sweet introduction. So hi everyone, how are you? Good, nice, yeah. Nice, well, I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm very excited since that it's actually my first time here in Bochum in Germany, so really excited about it. And so thanks also to the organizers for having me. And thanks to the organizers for having me. And also thank you everyone for being here. So, yeah. So actually, she's introduced me, but for those who, if we didn't met before, so my name is Sara, and I'm Moroccan, and I live and work in Paris, in France. So you can find me on Twitter. Actually, it's my favorite social network. So if you have some remarks or whatever, or questions or whatever, you can reach out. I will be very happy to answer you. So, like she said, I'm a tech lead and front-end web developer at Dassault Systèmes, which is a French company that develops 3D design and product lifecycle management software. I'm an electronics and computer science engineer by training and self-taught web developer. So, something more about me. Actually, there's really something that matters for me, namely women in tech. So, let's have a show of hands. How many women are here today? Yeah, nice, not that bad. Okay, I'm really happy with that. Okay, so actually, maybe you already know that women are underrepresented in tech in general and in technical events. Well, definitely not this one actually, because they're like 70% of speakers are women today. So let's applaud them. Yeah. So for this cause, actually, I'm trying to do my best. So this is why I'm involved in two communities in France. So the first one is called RuhrJS France, and one of its leaders, and it aims to give visibility to women in tech, by helping them getting accepted in conference techs. And also, I'm one of Dassault Systèmes advocates in Elle Bouge, so it's in French, and in English means Girls on the Move. So it's also a French association that aims to create technical vocation among young girls. So this being said, so let's go back for a second. And so my talk is entitled Web Components, It's All Rainbows and Unicorns, Is it? So actually, I choose this expression to describe what it means to finally find a true happy ending. So actually, some developers think that web components are like a cure-all solution for all or some of front-end problems. So let's see if this is true. So when this came out, web components, maybe we already saw some quotes on the web, like that web components are a revolution or they are like a game changer. So just some articles about saying how exciting and promising they are. But in the other side, like for example, in the beginning of this year, we also found one article called "The Broken Promise of Web Components." So actually, this talk is like an opinion piece. So just take what I say with a grain of salt and try it for yourself. So in this talk, I'll be talking actually about some pain points of web components. So when I started preparing for this talk, actually last year I had this chance to start one application from scratch. So actually, and I did some research on the net and found out that component-based architecture is like the de facto architecture for a lot of applications. And actually, if you think about it, it seems like very logical that you will compose your interfaces in this hierarchy of components. So in this example, for example, I stole this one from React websites. Maybe someone already saw it. So in this example, let's just imagine it in HTML. So you will have like so many nested divs with some class names that are desperately showing what is the intent of each element. So what about just having web components that have some custom tags that will actually explain what is the intent of the elements. And there will be like few of them, not too many divs. So this architecture actually was adopted by too many frameworks and libraries. So for example, we will find that in Angular 4 component, for example, we will have this add component function decorator that will take a selector, which is a custom tag, and a template. So here you can use your custom element. And in Ember, also you can find that in this template, for example, here, the custom element there called blog post. So it is used like a custom element in the template below, right? And Polymer. So, well, Polymer, it's not a framework. Actually, it's a library that sugars the web components APIs. So it is basically based on web components. So here we are using like our custom elements. So I don't have, these frameworks and libraries are actually great. I don't have anything against them, but each time you need to learn specific code, and you need even learn maybe like specific languages. For example, for Angular 4, you need to learn TypeScript. So these frameworks make it hard to get along. And what I need as a developer, actually, I think that harmony happens when there is less learning curve. So I think that what I need is only create my web components using native code with some vanilla JavaScript, and that's it, and use them right away in my application. And actually, web components actually respond to this issue. But fortunately, they are not widely supported by all the browsers. But fortunately, actually, we have this polyfill that is called webcomponents.js for all these native APIs. But anyway, you can find other polyfills that are specific for each native API if you need to only work on just only one native API. So how many of you in here are already developing web components? Oh, not that much. Well, anyway, it's a lucky day. There's a reflection on web components here. So web components are a set of web platform APIs that allow you to create new custom, reusable, encapsulated HTML tags to use in web apps. And the start of the show there are 4 technologies called, so the first one, HTML template tag, HTML imports, custom elements, and the spooky named Shadow DOM. So let's start with the first one, HTML template tag. So the idea here is that you will define a segment in your DOM that will be inert. So which means that when the browser encounters this tag, it will parse it, but it will not render it. So if you do a query selector, for example, with the template tag, for example, if you do a query selector to retrieve the div with the container ID, you will not find it. So if you want to find it, then you need to query selector the template itself, and then retrieve the content, and then append it to a host div, for example. And once you do that, so you will bring to life the content of this template. So for example, the scripts will be executed, images will be fetched, and even the style sheet will take effect also. So actually, HTML template tag, it's a fairly well spec'd out standard. It does what it says on the tin. But actually, I don't think that is something that's going to revolutionize your apps. If you are used to use handlebars or mustache templates, for example. And also, if you are used to data binding, for example, well, you will be a little bit disappointed, so that there is no binding at all. Secondly, HTML imports. So here it's really easy too. The idea here is you will be able to load an HTML document to your index.html file, for example. So let's imagine that you have a big application and you have a lot of components, so you can actually have one folder with several HTML files for each component. And you can imagine that in each file, you will have the template of your container, of your component, the style of it, and the script that will contain the logic of this component. But actually, if you try this code on Chrome, you will have a deprecation warning. So saying that you are not allowed, it's like a deprecation warning saying that adding the style to the component, component.html in here will also affect the master document. So you're not allowed to use it anymore, and this ability will be deleted on March 2018. Well, anyway, actually, it's not. I think that it will not be the first deprecation in Chrome about HTML imports, and I'll talk about it later. So once you are using your HTML imports, so the idea behind is like to get your component. So here you need to use also, for example, the query selector function, get your import, and then clone the content of it, and also append it to your host element. So here, each time that you will be using a component, so you will use these lines of JavaScript, which I think that it will get a little bit tedious. So actually, HTML imports requires a polyfill, and it's not widely supported by all main browsers. Actually, Safari and Firefox put the development of HTML imports on hold, since that they think that ES module, there's too many overlap with ES module. And actually, even Chrome team, even if we see here that they are supporting HTML imports, but they don't think anymore that HTML imports are the best choice for web components moving forward. So the idea here, it will be to use ES module instead. So last year, this spec of ES module was finalized, so it's really in a good track. And actually, what's good with ES module is that it brings two features to JavaScript. So there is two keywords called export and import. So export here will allow you to tag things to be able to use them in anywhere in your application with the keyword import. So you're going to import your component, for example, to use it in other components. Okay. Thirdly, we have this API called the Shadow DOM. So it's a really powerful API. So it gives you the ability to include a tiny document. So it's really a full-fledged document in a host element. And it actually will be injecting it in a secret place. Well, but it's not, don't use it for security purposes, actually. So the idea here, it will be to isolate your DOM. For example, if you're aware of iframes, for example, it's basically the same idea. So if you do a query selector on one element in this shadow DOM, so it will not return anything. And same thing for the scoped CSS. So the CSS will be only applicable in this element in the shadow DOM and not in the rest of the application, and vice versa, which is very, very powerful. But actually, it's not supported by all the browsers. And unfortunately, the shadow DOM is hard to polyfill, since actually it's regarding CSS. So it's making sense that it's hard to polyfill CSS with JavaScript. But the good thing is that it's easy to either use it or not. So for example, in here, to use it, we're going just to attach a shadow with this function here. So we'll create this shadow DOM and then inject the content in it. And if we're not using it, so then we will just inject our content in the component itself. So it goes the same way with the CSS too, since that we have a specific selector that is called host. It specified this shadow DOM, so we can use it. And if not, we can only use the tag of the component. So when you are like in production and production mode and you're worried about cross-browser support, so you can add a flag, for example, to detect the feature that you are having, the shadow DOM. So if it is natively supported, so you will add it, and if not, you will not use it. And same here with CSS, so only the comma selector here will do the thing for you. And finally, last but definitely not least, the API called custom elements. So actually, spoiler alert, this is my favorite one. Custom elements enables you to create custom tags. So here we see that the custom tag that we're creating, so we can use it this way. And to create it, we use this API called custom elements. So we use this function called define, and we give it the custom name of the tag and a definition of ES class. So here we see that we are extending HTML elements. But actually, if I do this way, this button here will act like a div. But actually, I need a real button. So to do that, instead of extending HTML element, I will extend the HTML button element. So, and that's OK, since that I will actually take advantage of the native button from the platform. But here there is a difference in the calling this function, the define function of the custom elements, since that I have to add a third argument. So I have to specify for the browser which element I am extending. Since that actually some elements are extending the same interface. So and here to use it, well, I think that unfortunately, actually, instead of using directly the custom tag in here, I need to use the button tag and add this is attribute that will where I will add the custom name. And this way, I have a real button. So actually, maybe you noticed, but in all the names of the custom elements, there is this dash rule. Actually, it's a mandatory one. So the idea behind that is that this way the HTML parser will make the difference between the custom elements and the native elements. And it's also for forward compatibility. So HTML teams can add their elements. So yeah, we saw how to define an element, and we talked about a class. So here is how we can add the logic to this component. So here we can have the constructor, and actually we always need to call this superclass, since that it will give us the ability to inherit from the properties of the HTML element. And here we have some bunch of callbacks that are called in some interesting moments of the life cycle of the component. So for example, here connected callback will be called each time the component is inserted into the DOM. So it's a great place to do the setup of the component. This connected callback will be called each time the DOM, the component is like detached from the DOM. And attribute changed callback will be called each time that there is a change in an attribute. So the value changed, or we are adding a new attribute or something. So we have like 3 values in here and as arguments. So the attribute name, the old value, and the new value. So here, just a component example. So maybe you are familiar already with some components of Bootstrap, for example. Here, I put just this example of progress bar. So I used to use it, and each time you have to copy paste this structure of div, and also make sure that you are inserting the right CSS that goes with it. So how about just creating a component, a web component, and this way we will use this, for example, this custom tag. It will be easier to remember. So for this, I will create my class tag, my ES class for my elements that will extend the HTML element, for example. So here I'm having this constructor, I'm calling the super. And for example, in here, I'm taking advantage of the shadow DOM, so I'm creating it. And here I have, I'm adding this attribute called complete that only will make sure to like add the number how the progress bar will be filled. So here I'm having also getter and setter for my attributes. I'm having this function here called observed attributes. Actually, it's really a useful function since that it's returning the number of components, the number of attributes that I'm using. So each time that there is a modification on these attributes, this function called attribute change callback will be called. So here, actually, in the implementation of this callback, I'm using switch function. Actually, it's like a common pattern, since that I can have different attributes. So when I have this attribute, so I'll just change my style width and the inner HTML. And here in the connected callback, so I'm taking advantage of this callback to add my template to the inner HTML of the shadow DOM. And that's it. And this way, I will be able to use this element just by adding this custom tags in my application. Oh, sorry. OK. So now we saw how to create a component, but in a page, for example, we have like nested components. So let's take this example here. So I'm having like a custom navbar, toolbar, and page content. So how to make these components communicate with each other, how to wire them. So there's one way to do it. Actually, we can dispatch events by creating these custom events. So we can give the name that we want. And of course, we can add the details also that we want. And in the other side, we can make other components like adding listeners to this custom event. So this way, I will wire up my components. And actually, it's a good practice, since that if you need to have this modular architecture that is loosely coupled. OK, so I think to sum up this talk, well, do we need to use template tag? Well, I think that it's really up to you. For me, yeah, why not? We can use it. But actually, for my side, I'm more using like handlebars templates. And for HTML imports, actually, definitely not use them, especially if you are like starting your application from scratch. But yeah, if you are not, well, just continue, use them. And anyway, the upgrade will be not that hard. And for the shadow DOMs, so when you are in production mode and like to avoid this like different behaviors when you are in a polyfill environment, so it will be better to use just a flag and to make sure that you are using shadow DOM only when it is natively supported by your browser. And for custom elements, I'll say, yeah, use them. Actually, at least you will have this nice custom tags, and your application will be like really well organized. And something else. So actually, if you need like to start studying web components, so it will be great to start with custom elements. Because even some well-known frameworks, they are shifting to like supporting web components. So it will be a great idea to understand how it works. So we will understand the decisions, the design decisions that will be made by frameworks. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you for listening, and follow for the slides if you want.